Vroom, 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 vroom. Honk, honk. Get in, losers. We're going struggling. Vroom, 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 vroom. Hello, friends, and welcome to another ride in the Struggle Bus, wherever wheels an empty triangle. As most of you know, this channel started off with me going over the Struggle Bus basics, where I tried to lay the groundwork of how to play some good basic Go, and then we kind of transitioned into doing a lot of games where I go and try to show how we can apply those rules to play a nice, consistent game of Go. But it's important to kind of look back at the rules and remember why are they the rules in the first place. And sometimes they come up in games, but then sometimes they don't explicitly come up. But recently I played a game where we had a good example of probably my favorite rule to teach. Because of all of them, I think it's probably the easiest to understand and will have the greatest impact immediately on your game. And that one is not every stone is important. I think it's a very important topic to understand how to determine if stones should be sacrificed or if they should be captured. Because if you get a good understanding of that, you'll start getting a lot of free moves on the board as you watch your opponent capture meaningless stones while you get to Tanuki and take the big points. And so it was a good organic example that came up in one of my games, and so I wanted to go over it. Before we dive into that, just a quick thank you. I'd like to thank you guys for watching these videos, and I'd like to thank my patrons and subscribers for supporting the channel. So let's get into this interesting example. Okay, and so for our example, we're going to be taking a look at this board state and specifically figuring out if we should be saving these 4 stones or not. So I was white in this game. I was playing a friendly game against Eric, who is in the same league that I play in. He's also in a lot of the local tournaments that I play in because he does not live too far from me. So before we get into this, let's at least see how the game got here. Again, I was white. Eric is a fairly dynamic player. You'll see that he is not too afraid to jump around and not necessarily respond to his opponent's moves. So you can see that he has already chosen to Tanuki away from C15 and to Tanuki away from the top right corner as well, and then play this big extension and again Tanuki'd away. So it can be a really difficult play style to play against, and it's worth noting I don't think he plays on OGS too much. He's a 3K on OGS, but he's almost 1K AGA. He's like right on the cusp there. So he's a fairly strong player. I decided to come back and go after these 2 stones, and so we get this fun little exchange over here. We strengthen our group, and then it's our turn to play away. We go and do a little variation over here. He Tanukis again. We strengthen. He jumps into the corner. And we go block this way, take our strength outside, and then connect here, looking to attack the K3 stone. He extends, we jump, he descends, we then play over here, looking to get some strength. I'm aiming to jump in here, and then black connects underneath to connect his D6 stones to his corner, while also threatening to kill our 4 stones. So that is how we got here. And so now the question is, should we sacrifice these stones or should we save these stones? And again, this is a really important topic because this is a situation where if we can sacrifice these stones, that means that we get to play away, right? We get to take that Tanuki, as where obviously if we're saving these stones, it's going to be done in Gote, and black gets the first move. So we need to figure out, should we save these stones or should we sacrifice them? And we have rules for this. There's a method that I like to use that goes over when to save or sacrifice stones. So the rules that I have set up for this that I think do a good job of explaining this is there are 3 questions that I ask myself to figure out if a group should be saved or not. The first question is, do these stones affect the life and death status of any other groups on this board? So what that means here is we have to look at both colors. If these stones get captured, are there any groups that are alive now that weren't alive before, or dead now that weren't dead before? Looking at black, black is already alive. Everything is already alive here for black. So it actually doesn't matter if these 4 stones get captured for the life and death status of black, because black's already alive. For white, white isn't alive yet, but white is pretty safe. Also, these 4 stones don't affect the life here. We still need to get 2 eyes, or we still need to run out and connect, and these 4 stones aren't going to do anything. Playing here doesn't get us any more eye space. It certainly doesn't move us anywhere. So it also does not affect the life and death status of these 5 stones. So the answer to the first question is no. These stones do not affect the life and death status of any groups on this board. So if the answer to that is no, you go on to the second question. If the answer to that is yes, typically you want to save those stones. Not always, right? There's nuance in everything that we do in this game. But if these stones do affect the life and death status of other groups on this board, often we want to save them. But here, the answer is no. Okay, and so if the answer to the first question is no, then we move on to the second question. And the second question is probably the toughest out of the 3 of them. And that one is, do these stones have any meaningful follow-ups? And to show a good example of that, I'm going to move some stones around. So let's pretend that instead of this stone being here, it's instead at D9. And let's pretend that instead of A5, black played E5. So in this situation, obviously we can save the stones. If we go through and do the first question, we'll get the same answer. Do these stones affect the life and death status of any groups on this board? No. Black's corner is already alive. Black's side is already alive. And again, the status of this white group doesn't change at all. But are there any meaningful follow-ups? Here, the answer is very much yes. If we save these stones, and let's say that black plays away, and I don't know, plays something like this. If nothing else, we have the monkey jump, which will be a fantastic follow-up to reduce black's potential. But there's also potential to start an invasion with a move like this, because this threatens to connect up. And as black goes to block, we could play a move like this. And this can really muck things up. Things can get really tricky with this. And we can leverage the fact that these stones are alive to getting a great invasion in here. So these stones absolutely have a meaningful follow-up here. And again, if nothing else, we at least have the monkey jump, which will be a great reduction. So this would be an example of a group of stones that I would save because of question number 2, because these stones have a meaningful follow-up. But then if we go back to the example in the game, you see that we don't have that. The stones are fully surrounded. They have no meaningful follow-up. So in this case, the answer to question number 2 is also no. So if the answer to question number 1 is no, we move on to question number 2. The answer to that is also no, then we move on to question 3. Question 3 is, are the stones simply worth enough points to save? Basically, what questions 1 and 2 are figuring out is, do these stones have any value in this game other than just points? Do they affect the life and death status? Can they aid in fights? Can they reduce a territory? Or are they just stones on the board that are surrounded and don't affect anything else? If they're stones that don't affect anything else, then it just comes down to, are they worth enough points to save? In this case, I also think the answer is no. They're only 8 points. Okay? So we can give these up as long as we can find moves that are bigger than 8 points. Because at this point in the game, that's all these stones are. They're just points, nothing else. They don't affect anything. They're not going to affect any fights. They're not going to affect any fights. They don't have any strength. They are simply worth points. So in this case, I think we should sacrifice these stones. So for me, this is a pretty easy analysis. This is a great example of when I would choose to sacrifice stones. And in this case, I did choose to sacrifice the stones, and I played away. Now, we're not going to talk about this move, because this move isn't that great, and I fully acknowledge that. But I decided to play away. The other really important thing to point out is if black then chooses to capture these stones, I then get to play away again. So I get to follow up this move with this. So the question isn't really, can I find a move that's worth more than 8 points? It's, can I find 2 moves that together are worth more than 8 points? Even if it's just Tanukiing twice. Even if I played a better move like this, and then black captures, and then I get to play a move like this. Do you guys think that K6 and D10 together are worth more than 8 points? If the answer is yes, then these stones aren't worth enough points to save you. Eventually they will be, right? It's 8 points to save these stones. And so that's not a trivial amount of points. But right now it's just not enough. But if we get to endgame, absolutely save those stones or capture those stones. But this early in the game, we can find bigger moves. It is worth noting that these stones do not get captured or saved for another 30 moves in this game. Because when I played away, when I said I'm going to give these stones up, my opponent, who's a little stronger than I am, also knows these stones aren't worth capturing. And so he went and played away himself. And he didn't even directly respond to my move, which is perfectly fine, but it's worth noting, he played here, threatening to capture these stones. I played away, and he was like, yeah, those stones, they aren't worth capturing. The other part of this is if stones are not worth capturing, we can do this analysis before we even threaten the stones. Because black played here, and it's possible that he played this move a little too quickly, thinking, well, I'm attacking these stones, and Gabe will save these stones. But if the stones aren't worth saving, then they aren't worth capturing. And if they aren't worth capturing, then they aren't worth threatening. So he played this move, but it's threatening 4 stones that aren't important. And so if that's the case, then this move was only played to connect his groups, and it's just too small of a move. Black could have instead played a move like this to look to build the potential here, or could have played a move like this to try to, to turn on the Aji of the K3 stone. But instead, black played here to threaten these 4 stones. And this is a fairly big mistake for players at our level. Ironically, so is this. This was just as large of a mistake. Again, I don't want to focus too much on the actual move that I played at this point in time. I wanted to focus on the analysis of saving those stones. And so I know I spent a long time on this one small example, but I know there are many of us out there who, without putting much thought into it, would have absolutely saved stones, played something like this, without even giving it much thought, just going, oh, my stones are in danger of being captured, I'm going to save them. But I'm here to point out that stronger players will put a lot of thought into this, figuring out if stones should be saved or not. And so, great example of it. And again, I decided to play away, and we did not come back to these 4 stones for another 30 moves. It took that long before one of us decided that this was big enough to go save. So anyway, hopefully this can help show the light that sacrificing stones is a very strategic thing. It can get you a lot of free moves. That's the big takeaway here. Is, again, if we get to play away and then black captures, we get to play away again, and we get 2 moves, 2 free moves, because capturing comes in Gote, because these stones had no value. They didn't affect the life and death status or anything. They had no follow-ups. So that means saving them is Gote, and capturing them is Gote. So it's Gote for both players. So you really need to make sure that you're getting a lot of points out of that Gote move. And in this case, it is not enough. So anyway, hopefully you guys found this one helpful. Again, that was a good example. So that is all I have for you today. Go sacrifice more stones. Anyway, thank you for coming out for another ride in the Star Wars Square. Every wheel's end to triangle. Have a good one, guys.